Hi, it's Kirby Summers, and I welcome you to my true crime podcast. Today is December 13th, 2024, and while the photograph for this podcast is of Jay-Z and his wife, Beyonce, doing that imagery that we all recognize by now, again, I want to take it a layer deeper. Before I get started, I want to thank Hindsight DV3XR for the super thanks for my last podcast a couple of days ago. And three other people who were very kind to go to my website and make a contribution to my work in the form of a super thanks. Katrina K, Alicia Jennings, and Lonnie C. Now, I'm not sure if I was able to get in Abby N on my last podcast, but if in the event I didn't thank you in the last one, Abby, I'm thanking you now. This is new for me. I was only approved for super thanks, I believe last week, and as I have explained on the platform, they keep YT keeps 40%. The banking institution, they use Stripe, they take another kind of 9-10%. And so the content provider, meaning myself, and I guess everybody else who has this feature, we keep maybe 50%, maybe less than that. And so while I appreciate anybody contributing anything, it does help if you just go to my website if you want to continue to support my work. And this way I get to keep at least 90% because I get rid of the middleman. So while we have seen the photographs of Jay-Z wearing a t-shirt saying, "Do what thou wilt," I believe many of you know that that comes from Alistair Crowley. He was born on October 12th, 1875, and he died on December 1st, 1947. He was an English occultist. He was a ceremonial magician. He considered himself a poet, a novelist. He liked to climb mountains, and he painted. He founded the religion of Thelema, and he identified himself as a prophet, basically believing that he could guide humanity. This was in the early 20th century. He was born to a very wealthy family, and he rejected his parents' Christian teachings to pursue an interest in Western esoteric, I should have coffee. Well, Western religions. So here's the thing. I think what people miss is, yes, he was a Satanist. Yes, he believed in all of that. And we can see this now coming to the surface through people like Jay-Z, his wife, the Diddler. We saw it rear its head, although mainstream was not discussing it in the Epi case, as I have said here before. However, what a lot of people may not know or may not mention when they're referring to Alistair Crowley is that he was a spy for the British intelligence agency, and he remained a spy for the rest of his life. And it is understood that he used his position as this occultist, a little bit as a cover, but also he was, in a way, sort of removing the layers of humanity because, we begin in the cave days, right, when everything is very primitive. It's a hunter-gatherer society, and all kinds of things are happening. And then theoretically, we evolve into being a civilized nation. Well, that it has been scrubbed away through not just the effect that Crowley's belief in Satanism did to society at large. We see it in our music, and I will be discussing a little bit about Richard Branson, who is connected to Virgin Records. I will also be discussing another Epi-related case, and I'm going to be reading one of my chapters in, I've done a lot of different series that are on my Substack, and they all sort of connect very nicely with each other. He did remain a spy, going back to Alistair Crowley, and he used this in a way to scrub off the layers of humanity so that that the information that we are getting now that's seeping to the surface about the A word, the repeated A word, the drugging. Well, this has been going on for a very long time, and it's been suppressed. I did a patron-only podcast earlier today, and I found an old book that was written in the 1970s. It managed to make it onto the bookstores, and it described the MK Ultra program and what was happening, and practices such as the one that Jay-Z is alleged to have participated in, that Diddy is supposed to have participated in. However, what the three-letter agency did in the United States was that it pulled this book off the shelves. And so, I mean, that's really what happens. Mainstream usually helps them keep the information to a minimum. So what you are hearing from mainstream is really just the very tippy top layer, and only a minuscule, wouldn't you agree? Only a minuscule of what this is really about. Before I keep going, give this a like. It takes a second. I really appreciate those of you who take the time to give it a like, because again, it helps with the algorithm. And I want to welcome my new subscribers. I've gotten a couple of hundred new subscribers within the last several weeks, and I'm really grateful to have everyone here. I've had people here who've been with me for years, and I'm so appreciative of you guys. You've no idea. So I have a series called let me see, what do I name the series? I have so many series, but this is my Jarecki series. And it's the Jarecki Family Exposed series. It is named after Henry Jarecki, who is a German-trained MK Ultra psychiatrist, who is today, not today, December 13th, but who is now 92 years old. And in June of this year, a woman who I described a little bit in my last podcast sued him. She had been ensnared in the Epi ring, and as per Epstein's referral, he sent her to what he said was his go-to doctor for mental help and or the pharmaceuticals, let's say, that he would routinely supply the people who became ensnared in his so-called ring. Now, again, it is my strong belief, I will always say this is all interconnected, that they're all so similar that people tend to cap it off and it's this is this, this is that, this is that. No, it's all part of a very big worldwide thing that I believe no one else is going to ever say other than myself, because I have been studying this forever based on the fact that I was ensnared as an SLAVE to one of these billionaires, and I have been working for decades to discover what was going on, why somebody wanted to unalive me. What did I do? In any event, so I decided that I would go beneath the surface of all of this and share with you my part 4 of my Jarecki series, Exposed. And I begin with among the most memorable scenes in Stanley Kubrick's 1999 film Eyes Wide Shut is when Lily Sobieski whispers, "You should buy a cloak lined with ermine," to Tom Cruise in the costume shop. You guys remember that scene, right? She's the young teenage girl, barely a teenager, who is the daughter of the man who owns the costume shop, where suddenly the character of Tom Cruise is looking for a costume to go attend that Eyes Wide Shut so-called party. And when they use the word party, I want to emphasize that it is really an O space R space G space Y. And yes, I apologize. I may have to spell some words or try to use a different word while I am doing this. Just bear with me, because my goal is not to share what every other channel is sharing, but to bring you a deeper understanding of what this is based on. Okay. So Epi sends this woman who was ensnared to this German-trained MK Ultra. Now, understand, MK Ultra never stopped. Look it up. It began at a certain time, allegedly, but there are records I was able to find during my writing of Jeffrey Epstein, Predator Spy, which I wrote, I believe, in 2020, where I discovered that it was being studied at Columbia University, and basically hand in hand with the eugenics program. So that basically Nazi Germany learned from us. Later, we all know about Operation Paperclip and how the United States and other countries, including Israel, instead of putting the captured Nazi criminals in jail, well, they used them for the space program. They brought them in for other programs. And so that's where we're at. She goes, getting back to the epi victim, she goes to Jarecki. He says, well, now I'm keeping you. I'm keeping you. You are now mine. And she was from Paris, didn't really have, I do not believe, the proper paperwork. And he threatened her and said, well, you can stay with me. And, he knew he was repulsive. He's not an attractive man, nor is Jay-Z. I mean, we're beginning to see that it's, but there are also some that are very attractive that I've spoken about and that I write about on my Substack, who don't really need to R-word people, but they still do. It's part of degrading a human being, and it's a manipulation tactic. And if you manage to survive, meaning if they do not off you in one way or another, because that happens more than you will ever know, well, it's because then you do not know your way out and you become part of that world forever. Okay. However, what I shared in this part 4 was that Jarecki is connected to several children's programs. One of these is the Youth Empowerment Program, founded by him in the British Virgin Islands in 2004. And I show a picture of him shaking the hands of boys that are 8, 10, 12. Now, in the world post-Franklin child cover-up, where boys as young as 10 were recruited, you may recall, by Larry King from Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska. And this was pushed under the rug and completely shut down by the Ronald Reagan administration. We do know that H.W. was the vice president at the time. And so that was pushed down, but we're now at a point where things are partially, and I really mean partially, you are only seeing a tiny little bit of this very big worldwide horrific thing that there's probably even no name for it. But in 2017, then Prince Charles visited the Jarecki owned foundation. And there are photographs of now King Charles, and I have mentioned King Charles on this platform before, visited. Let's remember that the royals play a role, a much bigger role in what we are seeing than anyone will ever admit to, own to, connect. However, that little line that I began with the young, almost a teenager girl whispering into the character of Tom Cruise that he plays in Eyes Wide Shut, suggesting that he should buy a cloak lined with ermine, that is a very big clue into the royals and the royal family, and specifically the royal family of England. So again, we have to remember that Charles was very close with Jimmy Savile. He is Lord Mountbatten's grandnephew. The two shared a very close relationship. It was very similar to a father and son. And as I mentioned, I believe in my previous podcast, Mountbatten introduced Savile to Charles. That is what I know from my research. Now, I have a photograph on my Substack showing Mountbatten with Prince Charles when he's about 3 years old. Now, I did say that the FBI files described Mountbatten, the first Earl of Burma, and his wife Edwina as persons of extremely low morals, and includes information suggesting that Mountbatten was a P word with a perversion for young, BOYS, males, young, okay? There were, frankly, newspaper images that had been put up by people throughout the years, because when the internet started to become something that was broadly used, people started blogs, or they would share information on message boards. And there was a 2-page, very big article that's basically been scrubbed. There's a lot of scrubbing going on, by the way, for this image that I used showing Jay-Z and Beyonce. When I tried to go to the source, because it's now just a ghost on the search engine that I use, it's now just a ghost. A ghost image is something that it takes about 5 days to disappear, because it's no longer on the original article where it was. And so that is going to disappear forever, which is why I wanted to take advantage, and at least I took a screen image of it and I'm using it here, because this is all, it's all in the same, what, I'm gonna, for lack of a better word, it's all in the same family. It's all in the same category. However, this newspaper that outed Mountbatten, and I can barely make it out. That's how scrubbed this is, and that's how badly maintained this image was when I found it. But I can read war hero who preyed on boys. And then it shows a photograph of a little boy. It shows a photograph of Mountbatten. But if you try to find a newspaper now with this information, I don't think you can, So this was from 1987. This is when the secrets of Mountbatten surfaced. The minors that he allegedly preyed upon were 8 through 12. However, I don't know if anybody has ever said what I'm about to say. So pay close attention. And by the way, stay through the end because I've got additional information on Galen that you do not want to miss. So he had a preference for dressing these youngsters as girls. And there was a woman who was involved in making sure that the minors that were produced to him were dressed appropriately in the right size. That's a very complicated thing, meaning that these could not have been necessarily store purchased, that maybe they had seamstresses to ensure that these youngsters, very young, were dressed appropriately in baby girl clothing, so that they weren't even dressed as similar age of the opposite gender. They were dressed as infants. Have you heard anyone else say this? Well, the one thing I do is I find the things that are lesser known, and those are the areas that I spend days, weeks, months exploring and finding. So cross-dressing, we know, is an important facet of this. I believe we have heard about this in the Sean Combs case. We've all seen that photograph of Bill, who used to be the president, wearing a dress. We know that J. Edgar Hoover is alleged to have done the same thing. We know that the blackmailer Roy Cohn with Louis Rosenstiel, who, by the way, is the founder of Shenley Industries, that was purchased by my abuser's father, Meshulam Rickless. So I have a lot of tentacles and insight into this behavior and these people as a survivor of this world, of these what I want to interject here is that these billionaires are made. They're not from generational wealth, at least not the ones from, let's say, the 1950s, the 1960s, when these men started on their path into becoming multi-billionaires. They became multi-billionaires with, let's say, using illegal methods. And I will just not, you can fill in the blank for illegal methods, okay? However, let's get back to then Prince Charles. He spent 3 days at the British Virgin Islands visiting Jarecki's children's center. And then while he was there, he made some time to visit with Sir Richard Branson, whom he knighted in 2000 during a ceremony at Buckingham Palace. What I want to say here is that the people who are knighted because they have done what they were told to do. I think I should say to you that there are tiers, right? So that not everyone is on the same level. So let's say people like Sean Combs or Jay-Z, they're not on the same level, that there are other people above, other people below. And so we won't see, for example, a rapper being given an OBE award by the palace. We won't see that. But we see it with, let's say, Richard Branson. We see it with Paul McCartney. Jimmy Savile got one. When you see somebody being knighted, your first question should be, oh, what crimes has this person committed? I mean, bottom line, that's what it comes down to. It is difficult, I have to admit, discussing these things, even though I am trying to do it in a manner that raises awareness a couple of notches more than just repeating what other channels are saying. I really want to share with you the deeper layers of this monster that we're exploring. Now, Branson began his rise in 1972 when he co-founded the record label Virgin with Nick Powell. Now, maybe you guys do not know, but Virgin is also part of United of the music, the same. Yeah, I have it here in my notes somewhere. Hold on a second. I will find it. I think I'll find it. Well, of Universal, the same parent company that I spoke about regarding um Jay-Z for his Rockefeller company, the same music label under which Jimmy Savile, because previous to it being called that, it was called, oh, why am I blanking? It was called, well, I'm forgetting right now because I have not had my coffee, and 6 o'clock in the morning is a little challenging to do a podcast. But so we have Virgin Records, who again is another subsidiary. And I go on to say that Virgin Records, the very first release was Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells. Now, if you're not familiar with Tubular Bells, it was featured on the soundtrack of William Friedkin's 1973 film, The Exorcist. Friedkin, as I noted in a previous article, went to school with who? With Wexy. Friedkin is the person who made the most horrifying film of all time, and The Exorcist. Who's been able to watch that film at any point in time and not be somewhat shaken, right? I mean, somewhat shaken. The movie is based on the true life story of a German American boy, Ronald Edwin Hunkler, who became possessed by demons at the age of 14. Hunkler later became what? What did he become? A NASA engineer. Yes, working with the Apollo missions in the 1960s and the Apollo 11 moon mission of 1969. So, like, basically, this whole thing has Operation Paperclip written all over it. And although little is known about Hunkler's father, it's likely that he was a paperclip scientist, okay? And scientist, that's a really good word, an alteration for like mass murderer, don't you think? So again, in court documents relating to Epi's situation, a former victim, a second victim, claimed that Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, and Branson were filmed doing inappropriate behavior. And this came out, I believe, in January, so almost a year ago of 2024, when additional documents were released. There was another victim who stepped forward, naming Andrew. Andrew, again, part of the royal family. I think that in every one of these instances, let's call it, there is a connection to the royal family. So Branson had allegations against him. Again, he, like every other person, like Jay-Z is saying now, denying all allegations. Now, in 2018, I want to make sure to let you know that Jarecki's Kitty program became an international affiliate of the Boys and Girls Club of America. The Boys and Girls Club of America is nearly a 2-century-old American organization involved with children from ages 4 to 18. It has had so many complaints about that type of behavior throughout the years, and I am not going to be wrong in saying that since the beginning of it 200 years ago, this stuff was happening. Jarecki's son, well, he has 4 sons, and one of his sons is Nicholas Jarecki. Nicholas Jarecki dated someone who's very controversial, and I'll just tell you, he dated Courtney Love. Of all people to date, right? He dates Courtney Love. However, Nicholas Jarecki had right after his father was slapped with the lawsuit, Jarecki married someone else, and however, he has a couple of films under his belt. One of them is called Arbitrage, and it's about a man named Robert Miller. Now, I have named that person on my previous podcast. What I found interesting was that Nicholas would write the screenplay. The person that stars in it is Richard Gere, which is a whole nother kettle of fish that no one has ever really discussed. And the film pretty much parallels what his father did, which is to be married, to have a normal looking life. The film was portions of it. The interiors were filmed in Jarecki's own home. He has a home in downtown New York, another home in Rye, New York, other homes in the Virgin Islands. So this is, these are people who have multiple homes. However, the interior, I would urge you to watch it just so that you can see how lavish Dr. Jarecki, Henry Jarecki, Epi's friend, Epi's psychiatrist, MK Ultra trained, how extravagant a home he has. I'm not going to say any more than this, other than to say, watch it. However, the fact that he named the leading character Robert Miller is a wink wink, because Robert Miller, as it turns out, is a real person. He is another billionaire PR person connected to them and to the whole thing. And I told you the last time, also connected to the fashion mogul Peter Nygard, with whom Prince Andrew is very friendly with, and to Wexy person. And, in these films, there are clues to this underworld that they think that we don't know anything about. However, these films give clues. It's not just Eyes Wide Shut that gives clues. All of these films give clues. I will be uploading a podcast in the next couple of days about a film that is so close to the truth, based on the fact that the person who was hired as their advisor knew everything, literally. And I will try to upload it here and share as much of it as I can, but people dismissed this film as being a too over the top and too, I'm going to use the word irrational, but in reality, that film is the closest to the truth, and it was done a while ago to show you how late everyone is to be getting to where we are today, where basically at least we are discussing this regularly. And we wouldn't be discussing it, by the way, if we didn't have the very brave survivors who have stepped forward with their lawsuits. Anyone who's counting on anything becoming more than that as far as a federal um, situation, I do not believe that will happen. I mean, we see Sean Combs facing federal allegations, but again, they're very limited in scope as far as from where I sit and from what we have learned. I think that they're very it's really just a little bit that he's being charged with. So, like Peter Nygard, Miller is also Canadian. The British monarchy, as you probably know, remains part of the Canadian political system to present day, meaning that King Charles III, he reigns as King of Canada. So Nygard had also these abuse allegations, and they date back to the 1960s. They're described in the original indictment as gratification of himself, his friends, and his business associates. Nygard graduated from the University of North Dakota with a business degree in 1964. When we look at Dakota, there are connections there to the Son of Sam case, where one of the two actual sons of Sam was end of life. And there is a military base there. So all of these seemingly independent stories, as you can see by now, I think, fit snugly into each other, meaning they are part of the same, let's call it, puzzle. Miller, throughout his life, kept a very low profile. He rarely gave an interview, and he never allowed himself to be photographed. Like a vampire, however, he wanted to live forever. And to that end, he contributed generously to the Alcor Life Extension Foundation, which freezes a person's brain after they are gone. It's called cryonics. Who else believed in this? The epi person. They all seem to believe that there is a time where they're going to be able to keep going. Supporters believe the brain keeps on living after end of life, and that medical technologies will advance so that whatever their illness, they will be reawakened at the right time and never, end of life again. And they don't really care. Does it happen 50 years into the future, 300 years? They don't really care. They see time as something not to be worried about. They just want the ability to continue on with their, it's like, the vampire stories, right? It's not too dissimilar from that, just being able to live forever. So the first Alcor Life Extension Conference happened in March 1978. LSD guru and CIA asset Timothy Leary was one of the first who attended, and it was held at the Hyatt House near Los Angeles International Airport. And then during the 60s, we know that Leary worked alongside Stuart Brand. And who else? John Brockman. How do we know John Brockman? We know John Brockman because he held the millionaire dinners that all of these other people attended, that Epi funded. Again, they're all of this interconnected. And in part 3 of this series that I'm reading part 4 for you, I shared that Brockman featured Satanist Kenneth Anger in one of his projects with Brand, with Stuart Brand, who again works alongside John Brockman. These things are not by chance, okay? These things are carefully coordinated. So Miller, who dyes his hair even at the age of, I believe he might be 90 now, he dyes his hair jet black and he bleaches, sorry. It's just that this part makes me laugh. He bleaches his teeth a ghoulish white. He's a transhumanist. Uh, However, here's the thing. His search for young females, he's always looking for someone who has never had this experience before. Therefore, he goes very young. So I'm going to try to not get too technical here, but very young probably means 10, okay? And it has to be the first time because somehow he is into the red liquid, all right? And I hope you caught that because I'm not going to repeat it. He began his career as a disc jockey. What does this remind you of? Savile began his career as a disc jockey. There's a big connection, as everyone else is now discovering, to the music industry. Now, I've been writing about this for a long time. I read one of my comments, and I thank you guys for commenting, that said, oh, I'm so glad you're talking about the music industry. No, I have been talking about the music industry. Join my Substack. Anyway, in Miller's, the way he has put forth his past, he claims that being a disc jockey helped pay for his education at New Jersey's Rider University. Now, who else went to Rider University, but it's been scrubbed? Soon-Yi Previn, Mia Farrow's adopted daughter and wife of Woody Allen. There are some nooks and crannies with Mia Farrow that most people have not gone into. And again, I will be doing that on this platform. So if you're not subscribed, take a moment and do so. It doesn't appear anywhere in information on Soon-Yi's stuff. However, it does appear on the school's alumni list. Miller claims that he was a pretty decent DJ, but that it, quote, wasn't going to enable me to have the kind of money I wanted for the impact I wanted to have on people. And so what this former DJ did was he founded a company called Future Electronics in 1968, which has a really interesting backstory of its own. At that time, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were both 13 and began to toy with computers and programming, which was brought into their consciousness, by the way, by none other than John Brockman. There's a lot that needs to be explained. And again, what I do best is I peel off these layers, even if it just, sometimes it knocks the wind out of me, frankly. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 days to recuperate when I discover something that surprises me. Because, hey, even with all of the research I've done, with all of the information I gleaned during the 8 years that I was a slave, all of this stuff, there are things that still, oh, okay. But at least, I can recognize something because I will remember somebody's name, or I know something about a field, a certain field or something. And then that's why I am able to do this. So then Miller's firm it grew really quickly. And it's, how do you begin a firm? You're a DJ, you claim you're barely making any money. But suddenly you open your first electronics firm and you're suddenly operating in 170 locations across 44 countries, not just in the, I mean, come on, okay, Europe, Asia, Africa, Oceania, come on. That should be a clue to you that he was doing much more than electronics, much more. And I will leave it up to you, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are, and you can leave them below. In February 2023, scores of women began to step forward, alleging that they were forced with a man who was only known under the alias of Bob Adams. And, as I said in the last podcast, one of them was 11 when she was recruited by another 11-year-old who was instructed to bring young who never had experienced this before. Imagine the shock of I remember being 11. Imagine being 11 and being taken with your 11-year-old friend to the house of a monster and having something horrific happen to you. What do you think happens to the rest of your life? So he was somebody that would tire of the girl, and he had to constantly be supplied with new, like a vampire. Like, seriously, when I think about this specific person and the way that he went through his victims, and really, again, never caught, never caught. 70, almost 70 years of this behavior. Think about it, 70 years and nothing. Why do you think that was? Again, I will wait to see what you have to say in response to this. So I'm going to try to just phase them out because there's still a lot more I want to share with you. He didn't just prey on strangers. He also preyed upon the children of his friends. He had, in one instance, the 12-year-old daughter of a family friend at the time he was married. And again, these men marry these models, these women who look very elegant, very beautiful, but these are marriages that, as has been alleged in the Jay-Z and Beyonce connection, that it's been prearranged. You are provided a good-looking woman who will enhance your appeal. That person becomes your wife, gives birth to your children. You become a respected family person, and that is your veneer. That's your veneer. That is what he did. So at the time he was married, he had children. He hired the 12-year-old daughter of his friends. And what did he do with her? He did the same thing. He handed her a $20 bill after he horrifically damaged her for life, and then closed it with, go buy yourself something nice. Here's a 20, kid. Seriously? So this person, I mean, it boggles the mind when you start really looking at the individuals that have been harmed, what happens to their psyche. So in 1985, Miller purchased Charles Bronfman's house, and we keep seeing the Bronfman name coming up over and over again. At the time, it was the second most expensive property in Montreal, and it was situated right across from Edgar Bronfman Sr.'s house. Bronfman Sr. founded the liquor company Seagram, and it's yet another name associated with Wexy, Epi, and the Nexium ring. We know that Claire Webb, W-E-B-B, Bronfman, is an American heiress and youngest daughter of the Seagram founder, who, along with her sister Sarah Bronfman, funded Keith Rainier's Nexium cult. Okay. The group, by the way, had another sub-society. So there was a subgroup called DOS. And DOS is basically, it sounds like it could be a computer program, right? Yeah, but this is where the women were branded like cattle, and they were photographed in compromising manners, and these photographs were held to be used as blackmail in the event they wanted to break free. They could not, because the photographs were intentionally taken in order to make sure they would never leave. So here's an unknown fact about Bronfman Sr. Unknown, obscure, and I'm sharing it with you probably on this platform. I probably am the only person, sorry to pat myself on the back, but every now and then, you have to. This is very hard, grueling, taxing work. Jack Ruby, born Jacob Leon Rubenstein on March 25th, 1919, who died, as we know, on January 3rd, 1967. We know him as the mobbed up nightclub owner who murdered, or is said to have murdered, right? We saw it on TV. We are said that he murdered Lee Harvey Oswald on November 24th, 2 days after Oswald was accused of murdering President John F. Kennedy. Well, Jack Ruby was on Bronfman's payroll. Yeah, I may do just a deep dive on that, because that alone deserves further scrutiny. So again, stay tuned, because there's a lot more that I share. Now, this is part 3 of my Jarecki series that I have on Substack. So we have all of these connections. Now, here's the thing. When you try to pull up Miller's house on Google Maps, you can't get it. It's blocked. And we know, I just want to jump over to the search engines and who owns the search engines. Google co-founders Sergey Brin and Larry Page. Now, we know that they would go to the millionaire dinners given by John Brockman, funded by Epi, and they're the co-founders of Google. So are they involved in perhaps helping to shield the homes of these abusers? Because also the home of Jarecki has the same thing when you try to go in. Now, I found another case like it that connects to the Maxwells. Yeah, those Maxwells. So on Netflix, and by the way, I quit my Netflix subscription because I just was tired of being gaslighted. So in the Jimmy Savile, A British Horror Story, there was something that caught my attention. The journalists were trying to find information on institutions connected to Savile in the 1990s, when the Magellan Internet Guide came out, would get 0 results. Now, who owned the Magellan Internet Guide? Right, Robert Maxwell's twin daughters, Isabel and Christine, co-founded Magellan. It was an early search engine. They co-founded it with Isabel's then husband, David Hayden. And then the company was acquired by Excite in 1996, at which point results began to pop up. So this was not mentioned clearly in the documentary. This is something that I discovered. I took a screen image of the search engine that they were using, because it's an old search engine. It was created in 1993 by Isabel and Christine, who are sisters of Ghislaine Maxwell. And the search engines, it would never come up with any of the institutions that Savile was connected with. Nothing would come up about Savile. But as soon as Excite bought it in 1996, Oh, well, gee, results started to pop up and including, message boards where um, victims were sharing their experiences as children. So clearly, from where I sit, the Magellan search engine was created to hide because my abuser also invested in a company. It's a reputation defender type company which obscures the results for an offender. Okay, if you catch my drift. And that's what he invested in and was outed, by the way, I believe it was in 2004. He was outed in an article finally in Philadelphia. Um, and maybe in the future at some point, I will go back and discuss that. Um, Here's the thing about Christine Maxwell. These, all of the women and all of the family members of Robert Maxwell's brood, and he had about 8 children. They have very unusual backgrounds. Christine married Roger Molina. He's an astrophysicist, as well, at the time, he was an astrophysicist at the University of Texas. Now, his father, Frank Molina, was also a scientist. Molina hung out in California with Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard and rocket engineer Jack Parsons. Both were occultists and transhumanists. Moreover, they were both connected to the three-letter agency and to NASA. So I took a screen image of Molina's Wikipedia because people who were friends of this family and at the same school and from that world. And I hope you recognize the name Jack Parsons. If you don't, put it into a search engine and see what you come up because he was ended. Um, all right, I'm not gonna. So in his wiki page, he states that he was educated at the Massachusetts Institute Technology, MIT. We know that MIT again connects to the Epi person. He was born on July 6, 1950. They describe him as an American physicist, astronomer, executive editor of Leonardo Publications, and that it's something that's put out by MIT, and that he's a distinguished, and I'm putting that in quotes, professor of arts and technology and a professor of physics at the University of Texas in Dallas. Um, I'm going to read this a little bit because I thought it was interesting. Molina obtained his Bachelor of Science in Physics from MIT in 1972 and his PhD in astronomy from the University of California, Berkeley in 1979. He was principal investigator for the NASA Extreme Ultraviolet Explorer satellite at the University of California, Berkeley. All right, so many people from connected to the Molinas and the Maxwells, and frankly, even this story have subscribed to my Substack because I think I'm writing stuff that other people have not described. Sometimes, and I do look at who joins when it's an unusual name that kind of rings a bell, and I find it rather curious that they looking to see if I'm going to say to, I don't know what they're looking for other than they want to stay on top of what I am sharing with my subscribers. Now, some people may recognize Jack Parsons' name despite the fact that much has been done to erase him from history. There's a photo of Parsons dressed up like a demon angel. Well, demon with wings. The same kind of wings, by the way, used by who? Wexy for Victoria's Secret. And before I close, again, give this a like, subscribe. He was a rocket engineer, he was a chemist, and he was a Thelemite occultist. Now we can see a straight line connection to Maxwell, right? To the Maxwells. We can see a straight line connection here to Epi, to this world. And when I began this podcast, I began with the image of Jay-Z and Beyonce doing the hand signal. And I also reminded you that he wore a t-shirt that most of you have seen, which is "Do What Thou Wilt." Now, so we go back to the fact that this is all connected to Alistair Crowley calling himself the Beast, 666. In 1952, Parsons died of an explosion in his lab. Some people suspect foul play on the part of the US government, because clearly, if you know too much, you may not be somebody who can be trusted. Now, in closing, I'm just going to share one last tidbit with you. Our good friend Bill Cosby, everybody's father, if you guys remember this, among the companies that did work and helped Robert Miller, who I discussed in this podcast, was Texas Instruments, a very well-known name. Well, who was the person used to help people start buying home computers when that revolution began, when suddenly the computer was no longer just for, let's say, large corporations, but they wanted to transfer the computer into our homes? We know what the reasons are. I think at least most of us do. But who did they use? They used Bill Cosby. All right, guys. Well, I want to say that if you feel that you've enjoyed this podcast and this information, you can do a super thanks, because now I can accept these and I'm very grateful because it helps me continue with my work. That said, the weekend is right around the corner, and I wish you all a really good weekend. I look forward to reading your comments. All right, guys, have a good day. Bye.